F1 never ends. My name is Stacy Hewen, and last year I decided to rank all of the Formula One drivers based off of how upset I would be if they banged my girlfriend. This year I've decided to do an equally useful tier list. We're going to rank the drivers at how good I think they would be at Super Smash Bros. In this case, we're going with Smash Bros. Ultimate because that's the most recent one, and I think that's the most relevant, and I'm going to give them a ranking. We're going D, C, B, A, S, as you might think, but we're actually going to be renaming these. So at the bottom, we're going to start with wouldn't even know how to play. So this is going to be the boomers of the group. And the first one that I'm putting into this group actually is going to be Fernando Alonso. He's the oldest of the bunch. I would be surprised if he has even played a Nintendo Switch. And I think that he just wouldn't even understand how to control the game. I'm sure if you gave him a racing game, he'd probably be phenomenal. But in this case, I'm saying that, no, I don't think that that's where he's going to be any good at. The next one who I think wouldn't even know how to play, that's right, it's Valtteri Bottas. I feel like he's super outdoorsy. I don't feel like he was raised on video games, so I bet you he doesn't have any experience with the Smash Bros. Games. And I just don't think that he would really understand how to play the game, and he wouldn't even be able to compete. And let's see, who else would also be on this tier? We're definitely going to have a few. And I'm going to go with Kevin Magnussen. I think K-Mag also, he just seems like, I don't know, when he doesn't have a gamer aura about him, if you catch my drift. Know what I'm saying? He's another one of like the old guard, him, and actually the next person that I'm going to be putting on this tier, which is going to be Nico Hulkenberg, the other Haas boy, or should we say Haas men. They're raising the average age on the grid between them. I know that they were both hired on for their experience to reduce like the cost and crashes and whatnot. But these guys, they don't give me the vibes of knowing how to play a competitive platformer. I'm not going to say that, Smash Bros. It's a fighting game, it's a competitive platform. It's for sure a competitive platformer, right? I, myself, I don't know if you know, I'm pretty good. I'm working on getting all the characters into Elite. I know I'm not going to go toe-to-toe with the pros, but that's basically where I'm at. Actually, you know what? Just real quickly here, we're going to look at... Oh, yeah. Before we move on from this tier, we've got Checo. He's got the dadliest vibes, and dads, at least to me, are not usually the type to be into competitive, fast-paced fighting style adjacent games like Super Smash Bros. And I don't get the impression like he was playing much other than racing games when he was a kid. Although I do remember him mentioning about playing a lot of PlayStation when he was living in Europe and not speaking English when he was racing as a teenager, which maybe I should reconsider, but I don't know. I just don't feel like Smash Bros. Would ever have been on his radar, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Zero, I believe, has Latin American roots, so it's always possible that Checo could also be phenomenal at there. And so let's see what we're going to use for the thumbnail popped up here. It's because I had to, so many of these tier lists, when I was looking up these tier list generators, were like, 2023 tier list, and it's all the 2022 drivers. Like, no, that ain't gonna work, my man. Anyway, looking through this list, I don't think that there's anybody else who wouldn't even know how to play. So that's why we are going to move on to the next tier, which is Total Noob Button Smasher. That's right. I think these would be the ones that, Total Noob Button Masher. They don't smash the buttons, they mash them. So these are the ones who they'd kind of have the general idea of how to play, but I don't feel like they would necessarily be any good at it. And to start off on the Total Noob Button Mashers, I feel like that would almost certainly be Lance Stroll. If you remember when he was building that Aston Martin Lego for one of the Aston Martin driver challenges on YouTube. Yeah, just absolutely terrible at it. Man, I forgot that Daniel Ricciardo isn't on the grid because he would definitely be on the like wouldn't even know how to play side. If you saw him play Mario Kart on McLaren's YouTube, that was absolutely terrible. And next up on the who else would be a total new button masher? Yeah, Esteban Ocon for sure. I feel like he's a competitive guy, but he's also the type to be like, I wasn't even trying to like protect his ego. You know what I mean? Because he's got that vibe about him that he would just, I wasn't even trying. I wasn't even trying. Also, total new button masher would be Carlos Sainz. And that's just because I get the impression like he's probably not super invested in like more of the, let's say, nerdier video games. I bet you he plays a lot of like FIFA. You know what I mean? And that seems more like along his lines. So he would know how to play, game on the Switch, but he wouldn't necessarily be any good at it. And he'd probably just smash the buttons and try to laugh and have a good time because he's a very personable guy. And I feel like also, Charles Leclerc, same deal. He seems like he would just be trying to enjoy himself. He's the type of guy when all the people who don't play Smash at a party get together, he's always having a great time with them. He kind of knows how the game works, but doesn't really care. So he just mashes the buttons to see what attacks he ends up throwing out without really concerning himself too much with what he's actually doing. And then from here, we're going to move on to the next one, which is going to be total noob, but surprisingly good. Yeah, so total noob, but surprisingly good is the next tier. And this is one where I would have loved to have put Seb, but of course, Lecrae, he's gone. But I feel like George Russell is one of those guys who, even when he's new at something, he picks it up really quick. And you're just like, what the heck, man? Like, are you for real? You for real, George? Because like, you've like never played this game before. And then, he'd start taking some stocks off you. And you've been playing this game for years. And you just get really upset. Anyway, that's what I think would happen with George. I also think Oscar Piastri is going to be that type. He'll be a total noob, but he's just going to surprise you with how quickly he's adapting and he starts to figure out strategies. He watches what you do. You go into the next match and he'll be playing the same character as you and just trying to figure out what you're doing for combos, or he'll play the last character he saw you play. He seems smart like that. And also total noob, but surprisingly good. Ooh, anybody else do I think would be on this list? I'm thinking that probably Zhou Guanyu. Bet you buddy's played some video games, maybe not been super heavily invested, but I get the impression like he's the kind of guy who's kind of quietly competent. He wouldn't necessarily be tooting his own horn too much, but you'd see a determination in him. You'd be like, yeah, I can do this. And then coming up on the next tier on here, we've got, right. This is the special tier I like to call good enough to teabag. So good enough to teabag, what is that? Well, that's somebody who it's always rude to teabag. Let's be clear about that to start. But what I'm saying is that this is a player that's good enough that, they can take some stocks off you. They might even take some games off you, like win the whole match. But they're good enough that if you teabag them, it's insulting to them, but it doesn't reflect poorly on you because you're not dunking on someone who's below your level, right? You're dunking on someone who's close to your level. And people might think that it's rude to teabag, but my opinion on teabagging is that if somebody's dunking on you, don't let them dunk on you. And if they are dunking on you, you need to get better. And for the people who do it, you may say, well, why do they do that? That's rude. That's really disrespectful. But if I enter into a competitive match with somebody and they're not good, if they're not good enough to really challenge me, then it's on me to make them better by angering them. So if I start teabagging, if I start taunting them, then for a lot of people, that can give them motivation, put something on the lines that they need to beat you. Michael Jordan would make up stories in his head to try to make it personal because he always played harder when it was personal. And that's what teabagging does, is you make it personal. That's one of the reasons why people taunt in sports. You can either knock somebody who's on their game off their game, or if there's somebody who's not even a challenge, it can encourage them to step up. So that's what I feel like good enough to teabag would be. And that's where I'm going to put Alex Albon to start. I feel like he'd be pretty good. You know, he's had some time off F1 before. So all I'm saying is he's had some time to play video games and maybe get kind of good at them. So he'd probably be good enough that if you start really pulling away from him, let's say you get him down by like 2 or 3 stocks, right? You got 2 stocks on the guy, you can start teabagging, and you know what? He might be able to come back. Now, I'm not sure that necessarily I agree with all of these are going to go up into these final tiers, but let's go through them and see how we feel. Pierre Gasly. Now, where would Pierre Gasly fit? He's probably also good enough to teabag. I get the impression, like, this guy plays games. I get the impression that he plays video games competitively. Oh, hey, buddy. Now is not the time to be eating. You're very loud on the stream, buddy. We're doing tier list. You want to hang out here? I'll give you. I'll bring some kibbles up for you to eat up here. Here you go. There we go, little buddy. Anyway, sorry, he's very, very loud kitty. Don't want him to derail the stream too much. So who else would be good enough to teabag? Yeah, youngest guy on the grid for sure. You know, everybody plays Smash. All the Gen Z kids. You can just say, who do you main? They know what you mean. They know what you mean. Now, total new but surprisingly good. I'm going to put Lewis Hamilton in there as well. I feel like he's the kind of guy who picks stuff up very quickly. I also get the impression like he's one of those people who's just so frustratingly talented in everything that he does. And it's probably because he applies himself and he's analytical, but it always just feels bad, man. So that's going to be Lewis Hamilton. Now, Nick DeVries. Where is he going to go? Yeah, I feel like Nick DeVries is going to probably fit somewhere. He's had a lot of time off F1, so maybe he's, he hasn't even been in F1. I know he's been competitive in other leagues, but, I think he's had some time to play video games, but also I think he's been very focused on becoming top driver. So I'm going to put him in total new, but surprisingly good. I feel like, once again, he's one of those guys who will be able to familiarize himself with something very quickly. And with every game you play against him, he's going to get better. And I really hope he doesn't disappoint us this season. So now we've got just 3 drivers left. Now we're in the tier I'm going to be calling GG No Re Teabagger. So this is the guy who teabags you, right? Like, in the good enough to teabag column, these are the guys who have one character in Elite. You know what I mean? At least one character, maybe a few. They're pretty good, not pro level. These are the ones where it's like, oh man, you are planning to parachute out of F1 into Pro Smash Bros. If you ever get injured. You know what I mean? And Yuki Tsunoda for sure. I feel like he would be trash talking you the whole time. He'd just be like, get good, nub. Come on, scrub, get good. Absolutely, that would be Yuki. And Lando Norris as well. If you saw him playing Mario Kart 8 against Old Man Dan, he was just trouncing Ricardo, even telling him, how to be better with all the drifting and everything. And Daniel's just not even up. And that leaves our last one, Max Verstappen. Where am I going to put him? Is he the kind of guy who's really good? He's definitely not going to be in mediocrity. Total new but surprisingly good, like his old rival Lulu Hamilton. Total new button masher. Yeah, I could see him being like, oh, I'm not even trying. I can't do a Verstappen impression, but no, he wouldn't even know how to play. I feel like the only video games this guy ever got as a kid were racing games. His life has been singularly focused on racing. He plays sim racing in his spare time. Probably doesn't even have a setup that isn't a cockpit to play video games. I feel like he'd be right there with his buddy Checo, just being like, I don't know how to play these. Like, what are these kids doing? You know what I mean? And oh boy, I see that an ad has been put up here. Boo. Get rid of that. Get out of here. Get out of here. Oh, there's a lol. Well then, anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I figured I would just have a little bit of fun with this. If you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon. Big thank you to my patrons. I love you all. $5 a month, you can support the channel, what I'm doing. If you're wondering why I've been kind of quiet, normally race weekend update is what I would do. I like to do these edited segments where I write jokes about the happenings in Formula One, but there hasn't really been much recently. I will be doing a race, well, not a race weekend update, a off-season update at some point during the off season once I feel like there's been enough news to really like lambast it. And also, I'm going to be putting out a video I've been doing a ton of research on, and I actually think I may have an idea of how to predict how confident one of the teams are feeling in their car, or at least one of the drivers. And I've been combing through all of the press conferences, and I think there's going to be some pretty cool stuff that comes out of this. So hit that subscribe button if you want to see what that's all about. And thank you for watching Fiends, where the F1 never ends.